It is the middle of the 9th century, and a great time of upheaval, war, and revenge looms over a large portion of northern Europe. The land that would come to be known as England now serves as a battleground for the sons of Ragnar as they fight to avenge their father's death. Across the channel, the once mighty realm of Charlemagne has splintered amongst those of his dynasty, descending the larger part of Europe into quarrels over legitimacy and land. Our story, however, begins in the frigid and harsh lands of Scandinavia, a landscape that breeds hardened warriors and iron wills. Within the Baltic Sea, there lies the island of Gotland, a mostly forgettable independent power amongst the surrounding Nordic tribes. The year is 867, and the chief of the island has died with a single heir, Ivar Skallgor. The man is 20 years of age, a tested warrior in his youth, and a fiercely brave soul. If his character was the only matter involved in his ascension, there would certainly be no quarrel, though the situation between the young chief and his late father lays the groundwork for a troublesome road. 2 years before the late chieftain's demise, Ivar was set to marry the daughter of a Swedish chieftain. The union would strengthen both of the vulnerable lands, but the marriage would never come to fruition, as Ivar's heart already belonged to another. In his formative years, a low-born woman by the name of Gudrun had captured Ivar's eye. She was quick with both her wit and her tongue, and could be found frequently arguing with the elders of the simple land. As the two grew into adulthood, and closer in their fondness, Ivar found himself viewing his father in an increasingly poor light. When Ivar was a boy, his father would often strike out into the sea in search of glory and riches, embarking on the same path their ancestors had traveled through the ages. But now content and compliant men had found their ways to the old chieftain's ears, whispering to him about the will of the gods and their increasing caution. Many of the people of Visby tell tales of the arguments that would swell from the chief's great hall, as Ivar and his father would lash out at each other with words so sharp they cut deeper than any blade. This quarrel ultimately reached its peak in the schism that would lead to Ivar's exile, the relationship so torn between father and son that now many of the people of Gotland question the young chief's claims. Early in the year of 867, when Ivar makes his journey to his new holdings in Visby, the island of Gotland is in a precarious and stubborn state. Many of the warriors that had once brought wealth to the island have fled in search of more deserving chieftains, leaving behind mostly complacent veterans and untested young men. The time of hesitation and cowardice has also taken a toll on the already meager natives, causing a general distaste for the Skallgor name. This is a few of the many reasons as to why Ivar strikes his father's name from the Skallgor dynasty and denounces the late chieftain's rule upon his arrival, using the opportunity of his ascension to send out a broad message to any Nordic warriors that would hear it. He invites anyone willing to take up a sword in the pursuit of renown and riches. Though history would prove this is the right course of action, the bold declarations and sweeping changes a new chieftain brought wasn't met without opposition. The late chieftain's council was currently split in two, as the younger and more ambitious members saw Ivar's arrival as a golden opportunity, but the older and more content advisors saw only trouble and disrespect. Amongst these men, there was no one who stood in fiercer opposition than Refel, the holy man that had served at Ivar's father's side. It is said that Ivar had yet to reach his father's hall before the zealous and furious sage confronted him in the street. Harsh words and foul curses were exchanged, mostly focused on the cynical chiefess that Ivar rode beside, but all the older man's words managed to achieve was to erode his own position and seal his fate. Ivar bluntly removed Refel from his position and quickly promoted a man he found more suitable for the job. Many scholars debate the significance of this decision, but almost all are in agreement that the man Ivar chose was an essential step towards his ultimate rise. The debate merely argues over if the move was calculated or lucky. Onundr, a wise man and proven warrior, was selected to now serve at Ivar's side, not only providing expert counsel, but also bridging the gap between the split intentions of the assembled advisors. With the men directly around him now sorted, and the young chieftain left to wait to see if his call for warriors would be answered, Ivar elects to lead his men upon a hunt in the budding months of spring. This choice proved to be an almost fatal one, as during the hunt the scorned and bitter Refil attempts to take the young chieftain's life. Trying his best to disguise the murder as a hunting accident, the dishonored man looses an arrow through the thick brush of the woodlands, though his desires would be thwarted by an unnamed man that luckily stood at the chieftain's side. Having slayed an innocent and shown his true colors, many expected Ivar to execute the disgraced Refil, but unexpectedly, the young chieftain presented his enemy with an opportunity. "You have taken the life of one of my men, and therefore have potentially stolen a glorious warrior from my ranks. You are now to repay this debt you owe me, by blade or by blood." As far as we are aware, this is where the now famous words of the Skallgor family name comes from, and truly marks the beginning of Ivar's ascension and doctrine, by blade or by blood. Having settled into his new role throughout the year, Ivar finally takes stock of the warriors that had heeded his call and sailed to his shores. The host he had gathered is modest at best, barely numbering over 1,000, but the eager men were fierce enough to form a notable raiding party. As summer begins to wane, Ivar sails off to the east with his warriors, fixating his eyes upon the lands of High Chieftain Carapelg, a sluggish and complacent ruler with a weak grasp on his undefended realm. Throughout the winter, Ivar raids the holdings across the sea, descending upon a territory that is barely richer than his own. The plundering is enough to whet the palates of his newly formed host, but they already speak of loftier ambitions as they depart the Estonian coast. Upon their arrival back in Gotland in February of 868, the desire for more opportunity is presented in a message from the west. The great Bjorn Ironside of Upland, son of the famed Ragnar, had perished, leaving behind his godless and weaker son, Euriker, to succeed him as Jarl. Already other chieftains across the Baltics had taken the opportunity to raid his capitals and holdings, but there were still his vassals' lands to ravage just west of Gotland. It is June when Ivar's warriors land themselves upon the coastline belonging to Chieftain Riculfur, a content and quiet leader that happens to be away with his own raiding party, as the warriors of Gotland begin their work. As the lands are plundered and the month grows near its end, word of Chieftain Riculfur's approaching ships is brought to Ivar's attention. It appears the older leader had sailed with all haste in an attempt to defend his holdings, but all he will find is a fearsome battle upon his own shores. As a returning chieftain attempted to land his men upon his own shores, he first found himself the victim of heavy archer fire before the beach was suddenly crowded with the ravenous warriors of Gotland. When his vessels finally did reach land, his attempt to form an assault was almost instantly crushed by the decisive and lethal charge of the younger commander. Emboldened by Ivar's bravery and vigor, the once scattered identity of the Gotland raiders was forged into one by the flames of battle, causing their cries to deafen their opponents before they fell upon them like a great wave. As the sounds of battle began to wane, and the previously hopeful men under Chieftain Riculfur littered the field, Ivar stared out into the sea to spy the opposing commander sailing into the distance, his defeated banner flapping in the wind as the blood of his warriors seeped into his own land. When all was said and done, Ivar lost only 50 men compared to the 600 enemy warriors he had sent to Valhalla. In one display he had shown both his men and the world that he was not one to be underestimated. Ivar's first victory as a chieftain had now been achieved, his men bursting with confidence and naming the brutal event the Landing of Blood and Gold. Now with the lands truly defenseless and demoralized by their chieftain's flight, Ivar turns his attention back north to seek more riches within Jarl Eirikir's ravaged lands. Returning from his second raid in November of 868, both young Ivar and his now tested warriors settle in for a comfortable winter. Not only had the young chieftain managed to bring riches back to his lands, but he'd also begun the spreading of his name, fanning the flames with both his bravery and unexpected leadership, though Ivar's attention was more than likely pulled from his fame and renown during this time, as he finally had the opportunity to reconnect with his wife after the precarious road of his ascension. There are many tales told and songs sung about this celebratory winter, and while they all vary greatly in their focus and scope, it is unavoidable to hear about the loving couple and their frequent absences from feasts and festivals. The consequences of their time together is finally revealed, as Ivar leads his men upon a hunt in the budding days of spring. A letter from his wife informs him of her pregnancy, and many accounts from the time claim that Ivar's excitement exceeded any triumph he had managed upon the field of battle. Declaring that the gods smiled upon him when he also managed to take down a magnificent stag, Ivar speaks of his future son's destiny to inherit Gotland, and the trials he was willing to overcome to leave him a glorious realm. Amongst these declarations, the men began to call the inspiring antlers of the stag Gotland's crown. Though the name was partially in jest, there is no denying that both Ivar's authority and that of his offspring were solidified in the forests of the modest island. With winter past and spring in full swing, Ivar answers the call of his ravenous warriors and sails from his shores with his loyal host. As the warmer months of Scandinavia often bring conflict and war, reports flood in that the local jarls are at each other's throats. Jarl Von of Småland, the ruler just west of Gotland, fights for his claim to the island of Åland. This provides a prime opportunity for Ivar to raid the coast, as Jarl Von's men march to war. Spending the year plundering further and further south along the coastline, Ivar's warriors enjoy a completely unopposed journey as they grow closer to crossing into Jarl Sigurd's realm. As the young chieftain's band prepares for another incursion, a message finds its way to Ivar's hand as his wife informs him of their daughter Freya's birth. Eager to see his men satisfied and his child within his arms, Ivar follows the coast west into the Jarldom of Sjaland, taking advantage of yet another conflict between the Jarls of Sigurd and Bagsec. The raiders of Gotland move through the Danish Isles with ease and finally plunder the capital of Jarl Sigurd, one of the legendary sons of Ragnar. As spring arrives once more to make the passage through the sea possible, Ivar secures an even larger sum of wealth when he ransomed Jarl Sigurd's son before departing his lands. Now sailing back to the island of Gotland with boats laden with gold and riches, the young chieftain's return to his lands is a moment that will forever be spoken of as long as the Skallgor name persists. It is said that the docks of Visby nearly shattered under the weight of the gathered wives, their joyous tears spilling into the same sea that now brought their husbands home. Amongst these women there was undoubtedly the lady of the island, Gudrun, a small bundle of fur clasped in her arms, as Ivar triumphantly leapt from his ship and raced to embrace his growing family. Poets speak of a chant rising around the happy couple, as they were now surrounded by dedicated warriors and inspired countrymen that sought nothing more than to embolden Ivar's guidance. The shouts of the crowd grew so deafening that many believed the gods themselves were forced to join in. But whether or not the gods intervened, the outcome was the same. Ivar was no longer regarded as an outcast, he was no longer regarded as a boy, and he was no longer regarded as a chief. He was now the Jarl of Skallgor, ruler of Gotland, and the terror of the Baltic Sea. It is in June, in the year 870, that Jarl Ivar Skallgor raises a runestone to mark all he had accomplished in just 3 years' time. While it appeared that the young warrior had a boundless appetite for glory, the world had only gotten a taste of what he was destined to accomplish.